All right, welcome everybody to episode 4 of the Accessible Web Podcast. Today we are here with DeafLink's Chiodo and Dan Heller, and we have Paige Kirby doing ASL translation for us. So welcome everyone. Full house.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'll introduce Kay Chiodo.
Chiodo.
You're very lucky. She let you go on that. I'm very excited to have Kay and Dan with us. I go way back with them, back in 2005 or so. Kay is a certified sign language interpreter with over 32 years of experience. In 1990, Kay founded Services by Vital Signs in San Antonio, Texas, the Great Lone Star State. Today, Vital Signs is one of the oldest and largest on-site American ASL interpreting agencies in Texas. Kay's leadership has been recognized with numerous awards, including the recipient of the 2008 21st Century Achievement Award by Computer World for the use of technology to deliver accessible communications. Recipient of the Cleve Allen Award 2009 National Hurricane Conference. And the list goes on and on and on. I am humbled to walk in her shadow at any time. Dan, Dan brings 37 years of business experience and executive level management as an entrepreneur and corporate executive in the logistics industry. He came to work at DeafLink while assisting Kay with the first deployment of AHAS and ShelterLink. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Services during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Quote from Dan, Hurricane Katrina changed my mission in life. I met hundreds of evacuees from Louisiana and Texas in shelters who were deaf, hard of hearing, blind, or deafblind. Communication challenges were enormous. I have devoted the last 14 years to working with DeafLink in developing accessible communication solutions that support emergency management and other agencies through the combination of technology and human resources to meet ADA requirements for equal access to information. And in the emergency management response arena, that's how I connected with Kay and Dan, and we've been worked together for, many times. I went down there for a while, and I could see the magic behind AHAS, which is the Accessible Hazards Alert System. We'll let them describe that. So welcome, Kay and Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For being here. Good to see you.
So why don't you introduce what AHAS is and what the challenges have been from the very beginning leading up to this point, because I think that'll open up the discussion for accessibility.
Dan, do you want me to take it?
Thank you, Kay. You're the person that bore this. So.
Well, the Accessible Hazard Communication System, AHAS, it's something that started really the concept when I was a child. And I'd like to take full credit for the concept. I really can't. I grew up with deaf and deafblind, and of course, being a hearing child, I took full advantage of that by knowing when someone's going, oh, I know someone's going to knock at the door. I know, it's going to rain, because I could hear the thunder. But you know, through my growing up, I realized the barriers and the challenges. And a lot of the people who are deaf are saying, you know, we really need to know the same thing you know, the same information that the hearing world's getting, especially, you know, in the Arkansas area with the tornadoes and the alerts that went out. The deaf families didn't have a chance with knowing that, even though it might just be a few seconds. Those few seconds could save lives. So the concept of accessible hazard alerts really came from the interaction with what I learned from the deaf community through deaf children and then later deaf adults. But it's that equal access. All lives are important. And the accessible hazard alert system gives the ability that if you're a deaf mom and you're at home and you have children or just a deaf individual, there's a chemical spill in your area and there's an evacuation, you know, you need to know the same thing that your hearing neighbors are getting. And so you click on your phone or whatever device that's internet capable, you click on the link, it comes up in sign language, tells you the exact same thing that the other people are getting. And the same if you're deaf blind. Those alerts are formatted where it will raise the dots on your refresh braille reader and give you access. They're voiced. Right now we're doing English and Spanish for some of our clients. So, you know, it helps people with literacy challenges. And it's about all lives are important. It doesn't matter with or without a disability. Everyone's important.
If I can add, the challenges of getting the program in place have tracked well with just the education needs of all communities, with executives, with agencies who don't fully understand, as I didn't when I came to DeafLink, what the real issues are. But technology has changed over the last, well, George, since you were with us back in 2005, things have changed tremendously. And so the ability to access information through the web or access information through a phone, iPad, mobile technology has driven the need, frankly, to be more inclusive. But it's also opened a host of other opportunities where, for example, the AHAS program initially simply sent an email with a video, and that was it. It did not have an SMS small message system capability. But now we can send a link with the information through SMS. We can now send, because the wireless emergency alert system has expanded for the Fed, and you can now integrate a link into that so that you can send content differently than you used to, but now it allows for that information to go out and be accessed by people who are deaf. And more of that community, just like us that are hearing, we spend more time on our phones than we do in front of our computers. We sometimes spend more time on our phones than we do in front of TV, but it gives them a platform, and through our program allows them to get the same information. So, you know, we're blessed to have a number of large communities that have taken on the program. San Diego is one of our oldest supporters of the program. They actually are the number 5 in terms of population in the country. We're getting ready to close a contract with Harris County, which is number 3 on the list. When you start adding these large communities that are now beginning to understand what Kay has been preaching for all of these years about the need for access, that there are groups of people you're not even aware are there that need information. When you start getting these larger communities to begin to understand the need for access and the services like ours that are available, that is a wonderful thing to see happen. And I might go a little farther in that the AHAS program has basically birthed a new opportunity, and that is what we would call the accessible community portal. And by that I mean that what we found out during the pandemic, for example, was that you could send out information through our system that was short in nature, but gave the facts, just the facts, what people needed to know. But if it was only a weather alert, if it was only a chemical spill, that did not answer the question during the pandemic, because what was happening? You had issues about whether or not to stay in, the stay home issues. You had issues about whether or not to wear a mask, where you needed to wear a mask, whether or not you could go to the grocery store. one of the first things that happened is that the transportation lines in San Antonio began to get changed because they didn't want the buses to run the way they always had. They needed to change some of those routes. They needed to give people free fare, for example, because a lot of people were losing their jobs. That information could be driven through the AHAS program. The other thing that happened was when people lost their jobs, they couldn't pay their rent. So the city had the capability, many cities had the capability, to send information about where they could get rent support. What about the CPS, in our case, the electrical provider? People couldn't pay their electric bill. How are they going to know that they didn't have to worry about it, that there were resources to help them? So what happened during COVID was that the very platform we use for emergency alerts and disasters now proved the point that you could provide other information that was relative to an emergency, like a pandemic. But there were so many people and so many things that were affected. You needed to have that capability to expand information stream, and that's what was proven during the COVID-19 pandemic. Was there are solutions out there, and that's what we've done. So as a result, we're very proud to say that San Antonio fully utilized the system. Austin, Texas utilized the system. San Diego did. Long Beach, California. A number of locations took the opportunity to use the system for things other than tornado warnings and send that information out, because that was a captive market that they knew they had, that they could send that information to. And then, as Kay will tell you, once it gets into the hands of a deaf individual, they will share that, word of hand, as she always calls it, gets out there very quickly. So it's a force multiplier. And I can go on and on, but AHAS has been, I think, probably the single most important thing that DeafLink has done since Kay began the company back in 2002. And technology has driven it to new places where it's never been before. It's really created something for communities that in the past wrestled with how they could get information out. They now have a resource to do that. So I think it's a long time.
I just wanted to add one of the important factors of all of this is, and it's an educational piece that never can be repeated enough, is that, as the deaf would say, the hearing world doesn't understand that, because we hear it all the time. Well, why don't they just read it? Why don't they just this? And I don't like explaining it in the terms, the simple way of people say, well, you mean they can't read? No, what I mean, it's not their language. And getting the hearing world to understand that sign language, even though it's called American Sign Language, and George, when we were working with Doctors Without Borders in Haiti during the cholera outbreak, and we made information about boiling water and stuff like that accessible, the deaf in Haiti were using the same sign language that the deaf use here in America. Now, don't get me wrong, they have Russian Sign Language, they have Chinese, and it is different. Even Mexican Sign Language is totally different. But the point is that American Sign Language has no roots in English. It's one of the third most taught foreign languages in our colleges today. And it's one of the few languages in the world that has no writing system or orthography, or wait a minute, I can sign that word, can't say it, orthography behind it, writing system. And so those written words, for a lot of deaf, it would be like you giving me an emergency text message in Swahili. It's not going to mean, I can't take that as actionable information because I can't understand it. So getting the hearing world, emergency managers, first responders, to understand that, yes, I have friends who are deaf that can read and write English better than I can. Majority of my friends have that maybe second, third grade, maybe fourth grade reading level of English, because it's not their language. My reading level, I live in Texas. My reading level is Spanish. It's pre-K. Actually, I always thought that when they'd say poor K, that they were saying they felt sorry for me. So, does that tell you anything? So it's getting that understanding out there into the emergency management world, just into the world in general, that this segment of our population is, you would never tell someone who's blind, can't you see just enough to read that emergency text message? Or can't you walk just enough to get in my building without that wheelchair ramp? But yet the comfort level of being able to say, well, it's not my fault they can't read written language. Can't they read enough, pick a few words to why would you tell this to this is one of our the deaf and deafblind population, this is my opinion, is one of the most underserved populations in our nation. And it's a challenge. And they're covered by that same law, the ADA, as someone who requires a wheelchair ramps or maybe Braille. So this is, I think it's an educational, issue on both sides of the coin, and getting the deaf community to understand it is their right to have that equal access to that information that can save their lives and the lives of their family members. So that's the reason why we do what we do. The accessible hazard alerts, and I am so proud of the cities and San Antonio, the emergency managers here and their disability office, our team, which we have deaf members, deaf staff, who watched everything. They're English, they're skilled at English. They would watch what's going out and say, this needs to be accessible, that you can ride the bus free. Because if you're having to choose between riding the bus to go get groceries, so now you can only buy bread and not bread and milk because you're very limited on your money. This is important things to know. And word of hand does spread in the deaf community. So getting that out there is just important. It's an opportunity to serve your whole community.
And some of the magic, and I will call it magic, that I learned when I was with you early on was that you can't solve any of the problems during gray sky times of a disaster. You have to do the work in blue sky times. You have to, emergency would pass and Kay would just keep on going. And I learned, we need to still work with people even when something's not going wrong. And a lot of what I learned from being with you guys is what I hope to bring with Accessible Web, and not just being accessibility, but a big part of what we're going to do is outreach. Because I think when you think about accessibility and where we're going with law, the laws aren't going to solve the problem. We need the community to be aware of what the challenges of the deaf, blind, deaf, and hard of hearing are going through. We need to make that mainstream. We need to come across more in a universal design so everybody understands it, so everybody gets that information. And without it, we most likely the ADA will, the WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines will be folded in the ADA probably within the next 2 years. We're very excited about that, but it's going to take the entire tribe or entire society to be aware to make that mean anything. And that's why the model A has, I think, is universal, not just, and it bore fruit with coronavirus, getting general public information out that people should have access to. Back when we were dealing with FEMA, Puerto Rico came out with a program because of weather alert. The VA got a grant and they identified who the blind were in Puerto Rico. And when a weather weather disaster was coming, they would print out the weather alerts in Braille and give it to them within hours of that broadcast, and just simple low-tech stuff. And we need to keep doing that and not give up even after the disaster passes. And I had the great opportunity of going to when they were setting up that field hospital in El Paso, and you haven't lived until you've been in a car with Kay driving, interpreting to someone that was signing in the back seat going at relatively high speed. I've recovered since then, but it was very exciting, and I've always remembered that, be careful. And plus, Kay was a great driver. But
I will add, if I can add a quick story. Mike Houston, which George, is deaf. He used to work with us. FEMA poached him and took him away from us. But he and I were on a business trip in Houston one time, and it was when mobile video was becoming just in its first inception, if you will. And Mike was driving. Mike decided he wanted to call somebody, so he opened up his laptop. He had it connected through a MiFi, and we're in downtown Houston, and he's signing, and he's talking, and he's driving. We nearly ran into an abutment trying to get off the freeway. I slammed his laptop shut before I died. So, but it was interesting in that is where technology begins to really begin to take effect. And so today's point too is that we have run out of excuses to not provide access. It's no longer a technical question. It's a question of willpower, commitment, and getting the right minds in the right places to say, yes, we need to do this, and make it part of the cost of operation. And by that I mean, Kay said it 1,000 times, you will not find a building that's built anymore that doesn't have a ramp built as part of the plan. So why not accessible communication? Why not all the other things that invite full participation and inclusion from this group of tremendous minds that just need that extra accommodation to help them contribute? So there's a lot there that is better than it was, but it's still a challenge. And it's always a question of funding. Everybody always says, well, we don't have the money to do this. I find it interesting that some of the largest communities in this nation have found the heart and the funding to do what's right in their community.
That's right.
So, we just, in military terms, is sustaining the attack. You can't start and then stop a week later because you got tired. You have to keep going. It's a collective effort. It's finding like hearts and minds. It's finding folks like y'all that have an engagement in this process and using the tools like you're using right now to help get the word out. And it's people like Kay that can educate others, like our interpreter, Paige. Paige can do the same thing. I mean, we're all engaged in this, but it is far different than it was 15 years ago, George, when you first got engaged with us. It's better, but it's still challenging.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I think now I'm going to get into my complain mode here. And it's really, I am complaining, but I don't like someone to complain unless you bring me a solution. And I believe that. I try to practice what I preach. During COVID, we have a nonprofit side which is called No Barriers Communications, and actually the name of that came from George. He was all over the and I know. So everything we do, we blame on George if it doesn't work right.
Good or bad.
And it has really it's really grown, and so when we have a challenge, like we did during COVID, and we had already seen some of the challenges before COVID hit, but it just amplified the situation. We set up, and his name is Yenter, Yenter, Yenter 2, and Pamie, Pamie, who's deaf, and they're on our staff. Myself, we set up VPs. I'm talking with an S. VPs in our home where we could take calls. And I'm going to tell you why. Not because we didn't have anything better to do. But we started getting on our one VP, we were getting calls from people, not just in Texas, not just in San Antonio. We were getting them from all over the United States and outside the United States. I need help. And we would get them calling. I'm not the brightest one in the box here. 30-something years ago, I posted, and it's on my business cards, which I recently took off, but my cell phone number is out there in the deaf community. I've always believed that you do not serve a community and they can't get a hold of you. I don't care if you're a CEO. That just means you're more responsible. You should be available. Okay, like I said, not the brightest one in the box. But I would get calls of someone, Kansas, showing me, look, no food, and showing me their kids. We're out of food, we're hungry, help. Talking about web accessibility, if I'm deaf and I depend as my primary language, I'm so sorry, Paige, as my mode of communication, I can't read your website. First of all, I don't even know there's a website. We told one person, you need to find your food bank. No, my bank only takes care of my money. They don't give food. And that's not making fun of someone. We learn all of these things as hearing people growing up. They don't teach you about doing taxes in school. You hear that from your parents. 90% of deaf kids are born to hearing parents. Sorry, parents out there. Majority of those parents never learned to sign beyond basics. So now we've got people calling us who don't know what a food bank is. If we take these calls, we turn, and we're talking VP. This person's up on the VP here. We're turning to our computer. Okay, state, which one? Where do you live? City. Okay, we're trying to find their food bank and we're registering them. My frustration is Noblecom, No Barriers Communications, we shortened it to NBC or Noblecom, made videos, several thousands of dollars worth of videos, and gave them to a food bank. Said, set the example for the nation. Let's make your sign-up page accessible. Won't even go there. Never got to even talk directly to the CEO or anything, but we're working on it. This is an emergency, y'all. We got families here with no food. I had one food bank tell me, they can just come by, we'll just give them a bag of food. Wait a minute. What about that deaf mom and dad who doesn't read your language, but yet they've got a kid, if they eat something with nuts in it, they got this going on, swelling up, anaphylactic shock, but they can't read the ingredients. They need to talk to you and say, please read the label on that, and does it have this or that? Sometimes they need a little bit more help. And they're going, well, we don't have time. This is a pen. So yes, my language can get a little bit tinted at some point. Be quiet, George. So, Peter, stop laughing. So, the education process doesn't need to be happening in the middle of a pandemic. And George is exactly right. If you have anything that serves the public, you need to think of this population. And I'm saying the 99% of these agencies, these business, they want to help, they want to take care of, but they need to understand the barriers. They said, well, no one came to us that was deaf and asked for help. because they know they can't communicate with you. So, we deal with this, and thank God that the FEMA with the inoculation sites, giving the shots here in San Antonio, they set up. We were very blessed. They had all the people at the Alamo Dome had badges on with the DeafLink logo, had iPads, were ready to help. All the information they sent out about where you could go and get shots was on that accessible community portal. It was in voice, it was in sign, and of course it's in text. So websites are a very important part of the hearing world. And don't get me going on the workforce commissions. How many deaf weren't able to apply because they couldn't read that website? No Barriers Communication has been doing the work for Social Security offices, workforce commissions, food banks. That's pretty much an unfunded nonprofit. And we were working around the clock. We were getting calls from each coast asking for help. So I can't begin to push hard enough how important your web access is, and not have a video here and there. If I'm deaf and I land on your page that comes up, I can type in anything, any address you give me. I don't have to be able to read it. I can type in well, that's exactly how I type www. But
she's fast at it though.
You bet. So the thing is, once it comes up, if I don't see the ASL, I can't even sign. Thank you, Paige. If I can't see that or see a logo that I recognize, I'm not going to find those videos. So you've got to have a lead to that information that's accessible. And once you do that, you're going to be impressed. And I want to give you an example that goes back, oh, Dan, I don't know, Hurricane Ike in Texas.
It was 2008.
We convinced, I didn't even bribe them with margaritas or anything, but we convinced a news station along the coastal areas when the hurricane was coming in, you know what? Put these accessible alerts on your TV. Just try it. It wasn't going to cost them anything. It was amazing. They said that they monitored their viewership go through the roof. Well, hello, of course. And so, but here, it's funny, I have a friend who's deaf and she's from Poland. Their news is all signed. She said, of course, it's controlled by the government, so she doesn't know if she can trust it or not. But the point is, we don't have that here. I mean, access to information is so limited, and especially when lives depend on it. That I will always be grateful to Mr. Jack Colley, who passed away, what, 5 years? It's been 10 years? How long ago, Dan?
In 2011, okay.
He was the emergency manager for the state of Texas, and he did a contract for AHAS for the whole state. And he said, every life is important to me. They will not die on my watch if there's anything I can do. It is, and it's sad because he got it. And just because it was the right thing to do, and he cared, he truly cared about, as he said, the people he serves. So if we could get that across, whether it's web access to vital information, and emergency information. And when I say emergency, the fact that City of San Antonio, James Mendoza and Eric Walsh, here in San Antonio, and the Disability Office with Debbie Sharvin, deaf need to know their electricity wasn't going to get cut off. They needed to know that, my water's not going to get cut off. They needed to know I could ride that bus free. They needed to know these things because it impacts the quality of their life. I'm very proud of what has happened, And I hope I live long enough to see that access spread across our nation. So, and that's why I appreciate the opportunity to talk today with y'all and pick on George.
You guys are blowing my mind a little bit here. You know, when George and I decided to do a podcast a few months back, we had just done kind of this happy hour with Dan Goldstein, and had so many questions answered about the legal landscape. And Accessible Web is admittedly a new company in the web accessibility space. You know, we're really trying to align ourselves with the community and to do things right with, the whole spectrum of folks with disabilities. But, we're new to this and we have a lot to learn. There's a lot of knowledge we don't have, not having immersed ourselves in this. George has definitely been way more immersed than I have. I'm kind of a web guy that, certainly think of myself as very empathetic, but I didn't really even understand that web accessibility was a thing until a few years ago. So anyway, the reason we wanted to do this podcast was to really get a lot of voices on this and to let people talk and kind of let us learn. And this has been tremendous today because I continuously find myself kind of humbled and maybe embarrassed isn't the right word, but at the lack of knowledge that I have, and I'm trying to grow this web accessibility company. And until today, I really had no concept that someone that spoke ASL might not have reading and writing English literacy skills. I've never really thought about it as two separate languages. So very, very, very enlightening. And I guess I wonder too, like my brain immediately goes to like technology solutions, and our team was just chatting today about Be My Eyes for the blind community, the app that lets you FaceTime with anybody and have somebody, if you're in a store if you're a person that's blind in a store trying to find oat milk or something on the shelf, have someone on the other end that might be able to see through your camera let you know. But are there any opportunities like that, or is that on your radar to build a tool like that might help to interpret text in sign language for people? And then I guess my next question really, because obviously that's going to be very limited by the amount of people out there that know ASL and that can actually accurately interpret. But are there any technologies that are emerging? I'm watching Paige here. Are there any technologies that can go English to sign language with kind of like, an automated sign language, basically, with a set of, call them animated hands on a screen that can convert text? Because one of the big things that blew my mind as we first started down this accessible web journey is how huge the invention, the internet and digital text was. Before digital text, there were newspapers. Newspapers had to be, delivered with these thick tomes in Braille, or they had to be delivered over like the NFB Newswire, where you had to call in and listen to the newspaper. And all of a sudden, they were digital online, and any screen reader could parse through. And all of a sudden, that digitization gave a person that's blind the ability to have a screen reader read text. So are there any technologies that you know of on the horizon that can translate that digital text into sign language?
There are a lot of companies out there. In fact, we recently spoke to one in New Zealand who are awesome people. And the thing is, it's funny because if you look back at like Disney, how they animate cartoons, and too bad Mickey Mouse only had 3 fingers and stuff, but they're working on it. It's not there yet. And because like if you watched Paige, you're going to see her make these expressions. She's doing it right now, like, yeah, okay, I'm seeing it. But that is part of the language. When interpreters are tested for their abilities, if I was to say, if I'm signing, I really like you. But if I'm like, but if I'm like, yeah, without that, you're not.
Yep.
part of the language and getting that animation and that expression to match up. There's avatar apps right now. I have one on my phone that I carry to use as an example. And my favorite one is when the emergency manager says, I have this, let me show you this. And he voice, you need to evacuate this area right now. And then he punched it and turned it to me, and it said, you need EVACAUA.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, there's spelling, that's your hearing word. He said, but it's in their ABCs. It's still your hearing word.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it was word English word order. ASL has its own unique syntax and grammar.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I guess if you're going to relate it to something, maybe more like Spanish, you know how it's not English word order, but it's a little bit of a complicated language. And so they haven't quite gotten there yet. Now, using those apps, if I'm a deaf lady and a hearing guy wanted to come up and was trying to talk to me in a bar, yeah, maybe. I think I need to drink a few more before I'm going to really accept this. But it's okay in a fun type situation, but for emergency information, it's not there yet. Eventually, we will have holograms that will come up and Paige will be on it. Yep. But it's not there right now. But we still need to save the lives and not wait for the holograms. And I've actually had emergency people, managers, tell me, well, you know, maybe in the future we can include them. What? You don't want to hear the rest of the conversation. That's bleep, bleep, bleep. But anyway.
On the technology side, Kay, until that happens, what can we do on the accessibility technology side to support what's trying to be done with the deaf community? Is it just putting ASL videos on our site? What else can we do to help get the word out and support the deaf community?
Well, actually, it would be the same thing if I asked you, your website's all in Spanish, what would you do to support the people who read English? You would put English on there. So it would come down to putting ASL videos on there. And, you know, people say, well, that's kind of interfering and it's too expensive. You know what? Put the important stuff. If you look at a lot of stuff on people's website, there's a whole bunch of filler in there. Blah, 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 blah. Put the information, put it there. We had someone who wanted the first survey. DeafLink made the first accessible survey because they wanted to get feedback from the deaf community. Well, hello. And they sent it out in an English text word. Not going to happen. So we made that accessible. And then they said, well, I said, well, what did you do with it? Well, we posted it on our website. Okay, that's not going to happen. So we've worked with FEMA and with Georgia Tech on a lot of this stuff. And it's amazing that when you give them the opportunity to be included, they will help educate you on what the best way to provide that. But right now, it's giving ASL. And what can I say?
Let me add a little bit to that, and that is that there's no question that the web has got so much information, and it is physically impossible to make every piece of it accessible in ASL video. However, there are key messaging in anything that's public facing through any agency, and I'll just start with the government. There's information they want you to know, Mr. Hearing Person, that is on the front page of their website. And generally, it's the most important stuff that's there, right? And it may change depending upon, let's just say a water company has an issue with a boil water notice, right? So where does it appear? It appears on the front page while that event is active. It should be in ASL as well. Why? Because death by water, just like you do. But what happens is that they may make it accessible or they may not. If they don't, nobody knows. If they do, nobody knows. So you've got to find a way to educate what I would call critical needs providers of service, starting with government, okay, and then making sure that those ancillary industries or businesses within a community that the city uses or the county uses also take information and make it front and center. That is the most important thing they want to tell the community right now. Public facing information. Now, I will tell you that when we get a National Weather Service alert, it comes in and it's 2 pages long. It's got every conceivable thing on it that has absolutely no value for the listener or the viewer, because it's not a call to action except for maybe 6 or 7 lines inside that document. When we look at a National Weather Service alert, we pare it down to the actionable information, because that's all anybody cares about. There's a thunderstorm warning. Here's a map. Here's where it's getting ready to hit. It's going to hit my house in about 30 minutes. Does it have hail? Yes, it has hail. But do I really care about the longitude and latitude of where that thunderstorm is? No. I just want to know it's coming. I want to know how long it's going to be before it hits me, and I want to see a map of where it's at. Those are all visual components which can be obviously translated into ASL and becomes a complete message for them.
Yeah.
But the same thing's true of every website I look at. Do we really need to do the platitudes and all the other stuff that is in content on the website? Do we need to have all the bibliography translated into ASL at the end of an article? I mean, if you think about it, and George, you're an expert at this stuff. So if you were to look at anything on the web and you could pare it down to information which is absolutely critical, it narrows it down, I would guess, probably 20 to 20% of that total content. That's the stuff that you got to make accessible, because it's the right thing to do. There's a law that says it, and you can afford to do that. You simply cannot afford to do everything. So we have to be smart about it. And I think that your organization, as it gets further into this, will find situations where critical information can be made more accessible through ASL, and it should be.
Yes.
Not everything. I'll give you a quick aside. When we were doing our work with FEMA, we had FEMA ask us about their website. They wanted to make it accessible. I actually did a research on that, and we ended up estimating, and this is 2007, it was going to cost over $600,000 just to make the content on their website accessible in ASL video, and it never touched the links that you would click that would drive to somebody else's third-party website where that information was not accessible. So in 2007 numbers, you're now 13, 14 years down the road, the cost has come down. It's become easier to make content accessible, but you can't do everything. You need to do what's most important for the community. So if you're going to address the community's needs, look at that first and make that content accessible. And make it visible and easy to find on your website.
And one of my biggest pet peeves is I was on, when the celebration for the ADA's birthday again, I was on several ADA webinars. Not as a presenter. I just clicked on, I joined, I wanted to see. My staff did too. No interpreters. ADA. One of them, I actually got off and called this office and said, nicely, sort of, for me, interpreters. Well, we never got a request for it. I said, I'm on your site right now about this. And where does it say you have to request? And she says, well, and she took me to it. I said, now, I have deafs that work with me that aren't going to be able to read that. How are they going to know who to contact, where, and how? Well, you can tell them. Now, if you're going to put something on your website that says, if you want to request assistive services to this Zoom meeting or whatever, contact this person or this number. Usually it's standard information you're going to use again and again. Put it in a video. I mean, my gosh, put it right up there. I mean, I don't know how many times but it was for ADA. Don't ask me, I have no idea. But the point is, you can't request something if you don't know how to access the information to do so. That makes me furious. Don't make me come up there. You need a video? George, call us. That's a very short video. Come on. I've even offered it to people for free. But the point is, if you don't request, I don't have to provide one. So even the access to request wasn't accessible.
Let me add something, and I'll drift back for a second. You talked about avatars. DefLink has always tried to remain aware of changing technology, and we do not discount at all that avatars at some point will be adequate to do certain information. So if you're looking at taking a website, you're going to make it accessible with an ASL component, and the program exists that you can actually type it in text, and out the other end comes an ASL video in an avatar, and it is accurate, and it conveys the message the way it's supposed to. That's a great thing. We're not there yet. And here's the difference. If you were to try and use an avatar right now and you type something in and it kicked out a message and you just grabbed it and threw it up on your website, what if it was wrong? Would you know it was wrong?
Right. Yep.
You know, our messages through the AHAS system are all vetted by interpreters who have the ability to look at that message and know that they need to re-sign this a different way for work, and it could be a localized thing, as a matter of fact, okay? But the bottom line is, right now, you need the cognitive ability of an interpreter to look at a message and convert that into ASL in the right way. Avatars can't think for themselves. They're only taking your message and converting it into what it thinks is ASL, but not necessarily in every case. So we're not there yet where AI has totally taken over the ability to generate ASL.
We basically, or I have hit you with all these different scenarios, and I think today I talked with a young lady who wants to work with us on a project, and I said, you know, the most heartbreaking story that I've ever told, George can lip sync this, is after Katrina, and I was in the shelters. We were setting up DefLink so they could communicate with doctors and stuff. And I had a lady come by and grab me and literally pull me on my chair. And as she's dragging me, we're in the medical area of the shelter, and she's kind of dragging me along. She's turning, she's signing to me, interpret me, interpret me. And I'm like, so she's signing, wait, I need to talk to the president. I need to talk to the president. So I'm yelling, and this was Mayor Nagin of New Orleans, who wasn't the president, but evidently he was on TV a lot. Remember her concept. He was a president, evidently, of New Orleans. So, of course, he stopped and turned because someone called me president. And I'm trying to be nice about this story. Quit grinning, Peter. So she said, I need you to bring back my old 3, my son. He goes, ma'am, that place is vacant. There's no one there. And she goes, no, he stayed. Bring him back. And he says, no one's there. I can promise you there's no one there. So she said, no. She said, the water, it came up. She goes, house. She does the roof. She's sitting on it. There's her legs. She said, I could see. Soon happened dark. And she signed snakes, water. and it kind of got quiet in that area now. And then she said, I need to move for safe. And she said, I could see water, dark, dead, floating by. And she said, I could see. When she did that, that whole area got quiet. So she acted because the interpreter's standing there with tears. I hadn't slept in like 2-3 days, so that's my excuse. Honestly, Paige, I'm professional. But I'm standing there, and she's doing she's on the house, old 3, old, he's on her back. Then she does twins, and she motions sliding off the roof in the water and trying to swim. And she's doing the baby's legs and pushing off the cars that are under the water. And people are like, oh my God, you can hear them saying, oh my God, that's terrible, and heart-wrenching. And she goes, she got right up in his face. Maybe God punished me because I'm deaf, Mom. I don't know. Maybe because I'm deaf. I couldn't hear old 3 yell, Mom, tired, can't hold. You find and bring back, I bury. Who you decide deaf, not know, evacuate. That's why we don't stop. So, I'm done.
All right.
Paige, thank you for your patience with me. I am so sorry.
No, thank you, Kay and Dan. Wish we had a high note to end this on. That's certainly bring this all full circle, and shows the importance of what you're doing, and very enlightening conversation today. I really appreciate you all joining.
Thank you for caring, and I know you must have, as they say, a deaf heart, or you wouldn't be tolerating George. So I know. Okay.
All right, a couple pieces of housekeeping here. We've got to give away a couple shirts to our LinkedIn and Facebook followers. So if you want to be entered to win a t-shirt, a sweet Accessible Web t-shirt, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. For LinkedIn this week, it's Tom Duhamel. And for Facebook, it is Kaylee Ladd. So if you're watching, drop us a chat, and we'll get your address. And if you're not watching, we'll track you down. George, you have any closing comments here today?
I was on the federal emergency shelter inspection team for the feds, and I remember coming on Hurricane Ike, and I remember coming in the airport and seeing that video on the TV screen of DefLink. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Let us know how we can work with y'all. We appreciate it.
Let's do this again, and we will do our best to evangelize AHAS and what you do, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys.
Well, come see us. Bring Peter. Paige, you can come too. You like it now, so come on.
Our developer Ken is in San Antonio, so we have a web accessible web person there. So actually, he's probably listening. So I don't need much to come down there, especially to Austin.
Yeah. Well, no, Austin, you get in trouble. You in San Antonio, we have a room. Come on.
Well, I tend to get in trouble in San Antonio too, but
yes, you can.
thanks. I love you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Later on.